His name is Color. He's been there all along, and he's not the only one. He doesn't always stand out to you, and he's not the only one. He matters though, a lot, and he's not the only one. At least that's how it tends to go. We don't usually pay much attention to colour in visual media beyond that looks pretty. I know I don't, but once every death of a bishop, a show, game or film will come out to remind me that I should. Across the Spider-Verse, aside from starting with a banger intro that, although she would never admit it, is all about Gwen's feelings, begins with a beautiful sequence of music and colour. This is the animators flexing, but only in part. The compilation serves to both catch everyone up to the events of the last film and set up where those left us off, which is with everyone feeling very, very lonely. This is the emotional core of the movie, that which brings everything together, including our two protagonists. Gwen narrates this while images of the events that led them to this point flash before our eyes, all of which are showing at the same time in the theatre of her mind. As she drums, she drowns herself in memories and emotions she does not want to and cannot deal with. No matter how hard she tries, she simply can't hit hard enough. Meanwhile, the music intensifies, Gwen's fears are given voice, and now the drums are drowning every other instrument in the room. The rest of our invisible players lose their voices, giving way to an impromptu solo that pushes them out of the song and away from Gwen. An instrumental representation of a fading coping mechanism that, combined with Gwen's loneliness, is isolating her from everything and everyone. And it's a cycle, a snake biting its tail. The more lonely you feel, the more isolated you become. The more isolated you become, the more lonely you feel. Fucking terrifying. The same thing that is expressed through dialogue and music is also explored via animation and colour. While riding the storm of her emotions, Gwen appears in all manner of lights: yellow, orange, blue, pink, green, blue, purple, black, blue, blue, and more blue. In fact, any time hurting is alluded to in the script, it is complemented by the same hue. And as much as I'd like there to be, there's no great science here. We all know the expression feeling blue. We use it to refer to sadness, depression, a lack of spirits. This is the most on-the-nose interpretation of the colours implemented in Spider-Man you're going to find, and it's not wrong, just limited. Let me explain. Colours don't have a standardised set of interpretations, nor should they, but they do create general impressions that can transcend culture and background. Artists can use these generalizations and create new ones to form underlying currents of storytelling, helping the development of themes, tone and character in the same way musical leitmotifs are used, in the same way Gwen's is. In her rage, Gwen argues with abandoned bales. All throughout she's depicted entirely in cold blues that spread from her like an aura, while the aesthetic of her world remains predominantly pink and purple, her palette. In fact, it is not until she leaves the rehearsal that we see her band in true colour. It's as if all of Gwen's hurting was spreading onto them, bleeding, tainting their personal dispositions with her pain. Or alternatively, it could also be that all of her own hurting was blinding Gwen from seeing them as they truly are. Regardless, the outcome is still the same. Gwen has failed to find a place where she belongs. She remains alone. A series of seriously good transitions as she makes her way through New York follows, all of which continue to build upon the story's theme. Gwen is blue, all around her spread warm pink hues. Gwen is alone, all around her stand people she could not feel more distant from. Meanwhile, the constant shifts between Gwen and Spider-Woman signal how one life cuts into the other, neither one the better, and both hurting one another. Anytime she is one character, she pretends not to be the variant in a routine that can only lead to exhausting isolation, as anyone who accepts Gwen for Gwen is not doing so for Spider-Woman, and vice versa. In the end, no one can accept her because no one can get close enough to know who Gwen Stacy really is, which is neither the one nor the other, it's both. So who is left to know her truly, to accept and want her entirely, to make her feel like she belongs? Miles remains constantly on her mind, not just because they are alike, but because he is one of the few who knows all of her, instead of just a part. With him, she does not have to hide behind either mask, because he would never reject either part. With him, Gwen can be Gwen. But they are apart. Here, in this world, the only one who knew her is gone, and the only one who might accept her, who should accept her, is afraid. So she fears too. To illustrate all of this, our next scene does something very interesting. Our previously established palette remains, contrasting coldness and warmth through opposing colours in the wheel. Such combinations always create a pleasing balance to the eye, which is why they're so often paired, but to say that is the only reason they were joined here would be unfair. Because of the rules set by the previous scene, we know this contrast is being used to illustrate the distance between Gwen and her father, while the line work of their apartment and blocking of this frame further emphasize the strength of their divide. This might also be the first time you notice the wet-on-wet painting technique that makes up Gwen's world. Although it is true that every Earth in the movie was created using different styles, it is also true that, at least in this case, these serve a purpose. Gwen's world looks watered down in a good way. Objects and space blend together, losing all detail but allowing for colour to take the helm and flood the screen. This way, our characters stand out from a setting that doesn't, from a world that is happy to be entirely secondary. However, none of these backgrounds should be ignored because for all the detail they forego, they are saying a lot. Captain Stacy's apartment is a welcoming pastel orange when Gwen arrives. He tries to start a conversation. She cuts it short, leaving for her room. The coin flips, Gwen's environment adopts her hue, and the one to stand out is her dad, who is purposefully framed outside her door, trying to reach his daughter through the winter of our world. An argument ensues, prompted by the same thing that did her last. Gwen living a double life she cannot tell others about. Captain Stacy, hoping to fix his daughter's sadness by delivering justice, and in so doing rekindle their lost relation, has failed to recognise what Gwen needs. Not justice, support. Not a cop, a father. We see this failure represented in the room and in how it is not until he ventures into the dark and offers comfort in place of promises that he can get through. As hard as it might be for me to accept, it turns out words, sometimes, are not enough.
Do punk rock to give your old man a hug.
And suddenly Gwen feels a little less alone. Some of the warmth her dad was offering manages to spread to her, so the world itself turns a little less blue. With this bond comes hope. Maybe she does not need to be alone anymore. It's a shame it cannot last. But I mean, there wouldn't be much of a movie otherwise. So let's just excuse it saying it's a canon event and hope nobody thinks about it twice. Right? Right. The next time these two meet, Spider-Woman has saved the day, but finds herself exhausted and out of webs. Captain Stacy finally catches his most wanted criminal vulnerable and proceeds with the arrest. This is the moment he has been waiting over a year for, the moment he captures the murderer who hurt his baby girl, who drove her so far away from him. He will not let it pass. And so circumstance forces Gwen to remove her masks and show her dad all of who she is. Maybe she was right to hope. Maybe he will understand. And just maybe, he will accept her entirely. As she drops her disguise, all her backgrounds are washed away. Only colour remains, without distraction, bringing our full focus to rest exclusively upon these characters. Nothing else in the world matters. Just the two of them. Meanwhile, the colour chosen continues to represent their emotions explicitly on screen, the vibrance of the former as heightened as the intensity of the latter. Warmer tones crawl into Gwen's background as her hopes for acceptance are given space, while cooler ones cut into Stacy's as the shock of betrayal shortens his breath. His values, his nature, his code battle with his love for his daughter, and for the first time his surroundings become oversaturated and split. Pink and blue. Certainty removed. All he's been working for is a lie. The solution to his problems is gone and his world cold. The realization hurts until, like Gwen, he too is swallowed by the ocean's hue. Blue, therefore, taints his decision as to what he will do.
You have the right to remain silent.
Now Gwen's own background changes. Colour draws away from her, a reflection of her last chance at having one person know and accept her lost. With colour goes hope, leaving her somehow more alone than she was before. The scene ends when Gwen is saved by two others. They saw what happened and what Gwen is capable of, so they offer an escape. As you might expect, no colour here was chosen without thought either. Gwen stands at a crossroads. Behind her is a cold world, where staying means becoming trapped in a solitary cell that is not dissimilar from the cage her father is now trapped in. Take note that this same electric cell is used by Miguel later in the movie, and its colour is not blue. At the same time, before her floats of portal of bright galvanic oranges, a gateway that offers a lot more to her than just the call to adventure it would if this movie had been made by anyone else. For Gwen, these colours are a new hope where her last have failed, a chance to go where she doesn't need to hide, to find a place where she belongs. Or, as she would put it, a community, a band. And although I might be forgetting one person, Gwen isn't. because to her this portal also represents the chance to visit any dimension she wants and, for the first time in a year and 4 months, be with the one person she doesn't need to feel alone with. That is what Across the Spider-Verse is all about. It's about community, finding your people, someplace you belong, about not being able to. This theme is the driving force behind both Miles and Gwen's arcs, even if the driving takes them down different paths. It's Spot's motivation after being ostracized for his otherness. It's Miguel's trauma and what he has been trying and failing to compensate for since his family died. Color is used to make this theme a part of these scenes as much as it is used to punctuate action and foreshadow plot twists, which is what makes the art direction in this film so brilliant. And naturally, no scene better demonstrates this than the culmination to Gwen's arc. Months have passed. Gwen thought she had found what she was looking for, only to discover this community wasn't all she had hoped it would be. In her desperation to belong, to be a part of them, she became blind to their faults and deaf to their lies. It was that same wild desire which drove her to betray the best friend she had, while more and more this spider society is starting to sound like a spider cult. You know, Miguel Tiger King O'Hara or something. But hey, at least he had the decency to drive her home when Gwen called them out. And there she was, back to the beginning, to being alone. This time, however, as Gwen sneaks into her apartment, everything is reversed, and not one reversal is coincidental. Where before she used Gwen's mask to enter, now the opposite reflection looks back at her through the window, a reminder that she is not just Spider-Woman, she's a lot more than that. Until now, because of her heartbreak, she may have successfully removed the one from the other. We can see this when she asks Miles out.
Wanna get out of here?
She could have persuaded him using 100 different arguments, and 150 would have worked, but she chose to distinguish between Miles and Spider-Man as if they were two separate beings to Miles Morales because she saw herself that way too.
Is Spider-Man grounded?
That was a mistake, which this frame is symbolizing by showcasing one of the reasons for her hurting. Gwen is hiding parts of herself, not just from others, but from herself. The lack of acceptance she experienced in her world has slithered inward and turned Gwen against Gwen until she could not accept who she was anymore. If no one else does, if her own father doesn't, why should she? However, this is slightly unfair to her world. Our previous scenes go out of their way to demonstrate how everyone around Gwen is trying to be empathetic or at least compassionate. It will not do to blame it all on them when Gwen was already rejecting herself before they ever did. In truth, part of the reason they never accepted her is because she never gave them a chance. Because she was too afraid to show herself and kept everyone at arm's length. It sounds harsh, but Gwen is ultimately responsible for her own isolation. If you don't give yourself a shot, why should the rest? If even you reject yourself, why wouldn't they? Another inversion is present in the realms of color, where in the beginning Gwen's apartment appeared warm and inviting, a mirror to her dad's disposition towards her. Now it too is as cold as her room. The winter hues may not indicate how Captain Stacy has become isolated without Gwen, although it certainly looks that way, but they do illustrate his sadness, an emotion we see in the mess around him, his weight loss, his irregular sleeping patterns, and the fact he was probably staring at Gwen's picture for a long time before sleep took him. Gwen is not oblivious to this. The photo with Miles is not the only reason she returned, but anger still prevents her from acting upon the rest of her feelings. Color changes here. Now the outside is blue, because leaving means a further severing of their bond, while the darker pink adopted by the scene as Captain Stacy flicks on the lights represents possibility, a potential channel of communication. Both continue to be enclosed in frozen blue, although the difference between the father and the daughter might be in how it taints his being, while Gwen seems somewhat protected behind her mask. Instead of avoiding pain by pretending to be someone she is not, she might be avoiding pain by pretending not to be someone she is. Whatever the case, the facade breaks as soon as it comes off though, and the room turns cold again as resentment impedes connection. It takes Gwen swallowing her pride for the rules to change again. She pursues the conversation. Dad is blue, she is blue, but the space between them isn't. The first colour it adopts is a mix of both Gwen's and Dad's, signalling another bridge to reunion, a little hope. Then, as Gwen asserts herself, sharing who she genuinely is, the environment around her transforms, influenced by her words. As she expresses her desires, her values, her failures and fears, the world turns a mirror to her colors, like it too can see her as it never had, how Captain Stacy sees her now. There is a big shift here, because Captain Stacy deciding he will not, in fact, be captain has major implications for the plot. It might just mean there is no predestined canon, no truth to the prophetic algorithm, and that standing by for fate to guide you and allowing only trauma to define you is a stupid way to live. It might be that. I hope it is. But it definitely means that Gwen, who had already accepted the loss of her father, no longer has to. And it also means that he accepts her entirely, as Gwen and Spider-Woman, as Gwen Stacy, as his daughter.
You're the best thing I've ever done.
With this reunion, her entire world changes, taking on a more tranquil version of Gwen's palette that turns the chaos into peace. It's a lot easier to accept yourself when someone else does, especially if it's someone you look up to, especially a parent. And now she can accept herself, others can too. All she has to do is ask. After this, Gwen's synesthetic palette of pink and white and black is never again tainted by blue. After this, Gwen can finally and unapologetically be herself. This is why colouring Across the Spider-Verse is an externalization of the inner workings of its characters and a visual manifestation of Gwen's arc. It's why the final scene in the movie has Gwen and Miles paralleled, with cuts jumping from one to the other as both settle their countenance in a determination that has only now become available to Gwen. Miles always had it, as his lack of belonging was countered by the strength of his parental bonds and how both Jeff and Rio give him security through a love which is unconditional within reason.
Good bit.
In other words, Miles can be assertive and confident in his decisions, in his view of what is right and what is wrong, even when faced by the dogma of the many, because his parents gave him the strength to do so through the certainty of communion, and so I don't take any credit away from him, because he was capable of recognizing and using that power. On the other hand, Gwen's lack of belonging and community created a hole deepened by the loss of her best friend and only remaining ally. The lack of acceptance from her father had the opposite effect from Miles, introducing into an incredibly competent person the insidious parasite of insecurity, causing doubt to skew her moral compass and permit her actions to be influenced by ideas she does not believe in. So after witnessing Miles stand up to everyone, despite him being as alone as she is, Gwen too gets the courage to do the same. She stands up to her father, plants her feet and lays out all of who she is. Doing so allows him to understand her and informs his decision to accept her like he could have never done before when she was a stranger. From this point onward, Gwen has gained the belief that she is enough, and she has gained this belief not from her father, but from expressing herself without filter or guile, with honesty and pride. Hiding who you are from others is not as bad for what it communicates to them as it is for what it communicates to you. If you have to hide, there must be something wrong with you, and every time you lie to others, you're telling yourself they would not accept you if they heard the truth. You're telling yourself you are unworthy of them. The last bit that helps Gwen come into herself is having that vulnerability be positively reinforced by the outside world, by her father. Because as much as individualism has its merits, no one can make it through this world alone, and you can never belong anywhere if you don't allow anywhere to know the real you. To end this cloying melodrama, I'll leave you one last thought on colour. The way it is used in Across the Spider-Verse is a clear commentary on how the way we feel internally has effects far beyond ourselves. It not only affects how we see the world around us, it affects how we shape it.